Hi friends, and welcome to my channel. My name is Tammy Ernest and I am a long-arm quilter. And here on my channel I like to share customer finishes as well as my own personal projects. And today what we're doing is I have loaded a quilt onto the long arm, and I have stitched the basting stitches, so it's all ready to start setting the area on the computer and picking our stitch. Alright, so here's my quilt top, and I have basted down the side edges and the entire top. It's all square on there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my machine up just outside of my quilting area. Not too much to the top because I don't want to run into these red snappers, but I am just outside of the quilt top area and then a little bit to the left. And I'm going to come up here to my computer screen, and I am going to X out of that right there, and I'm going to push this top tab that says area. And I'm going to do a 2-corner area, so I'm going to push this button up here, and that sets my top left hand corner. And then I'm going to bring the machine all the way to the bottom right, outside of my quilt top area. I'm going to go just a little bit more because I can see that this fabric right here comes out a little bit farther, and it looks a little more distinct on camera than it actually is. But I just want to make sure that when I get farther down the quilt that I'm still outside of that quilt top area. So this is my bottom right point of the part that I can reach at this point. So I'm going to push 2-corner again. All right, so right now I have just this area set. Now obviously my quilt is much larger than that, so over here on this side it tells me that I have a 93 width, which when I measured the quilt it was 91. Right now my height is at 15, and I know that the height of this quilt, because I did the longest part left to right, my top and bottom is a little shorter, but I'm going to clear that area. Not clear that area, just clear that number, and I'm going to put in 90. I know that my quilt top is an 88, but I want a little bit more. So right now I have a width of 93 and a height of 90, and I'm going to hit this home button right here, and it shows the entire square of the quilt on my screen. Now I know for this quilt, I'm going to take the basting off because I'm done with that. I know for this quilt that the customer wants a panto called espresso. So I'm going to go here to design, and I want to open, and I'm going to come down to espresso and click on that. So right now there's my design, and I want to repeat this design. Well, first of all I want to modify, and I want to resize this pantograph. And I'm going to lock in, I want my dimensions to stay the same, so I'm going to lock that in right there. Right now it says it's at a 20. Let me show you what that would look like real size. So down here, if I push this 1-to-1 ratio, it shows me that real size, that's how big it would be. So if you can see my fist there, that's pretty large. You know, on my quilt top itself, that's going to be one swirl is going to be that big, and I don't want mine to be that big. So I'm going to go back to my full area, and I am going to go in here and I'm going to resize. I've locked it so that my dimensions stay the same, and I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to go down. I've done this pantograph as tight as a 6. I know this client does not like that quite so tight. Let me do a 12. So let me go back up and show you what's happening. So if I would increase the size of the panto, you can see the dimensions are staying the same as I go up in number, and as I go down in number, it's just shrinking the whole design. It's not distorting it, either width or height. Alright, so right now I'm at a 13. I think I'm going to go down to a 12. Or as close to 12 as I can. I can get a 12.7. So now let me hit the 1-to-1 ratio, and that shows you what it is. So you can see my fist there. So a lot a lot tighter, and I think that's more like what this client would like. If I was doing a baby quilt or something, I would do it a lot tighter, because this is a 91 by 88. It's a large quilt, so I don't want to stitch it to death. Some people might, but I'm not going to on this one. So that's what it looks like in a 1-to-1. So I'm going to go back to my home button, and it shows me the size on the entire quilt. Now I want to go up here to repeat, and I want to fill. So when I come over here, maybe if I just keep the whole screen in there, and I'm going to fill, and it fills the entire area. Now you can see my red and green dots don't match up, so I am going to come up here to modify. And nope, I still want to stay in repeat. I am going, sorry about that, I'm going to stay in repeat, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm on the horizontal, so I want to hit point to point, and it brings those together so that it goes right from one design into the next. But you can see it doesn't fill up my whole area. So I'm going to go over here to repeat. I'm on the horizontal, so I'm repeating until it fills up. I like to go past my pink lines. Now, I don't like this space in between here, so I'm going to hit the vertical, and I'm going to decrease the gap. And notice as I hold this down, it is bringing that design closer together. Can you see that? So that you cannot see spacing in between there. And how does that look? So that looks, I've got it close enough that you can't quite tell where one line is and another one starts. But I'm not within my pink lines now, so now I want to repeat the vertical number of lines until I have covered my entire pink area. Alright, so you can see how that is. Now at this point, what I typically do is I will come up here to modify, and I will crop. And I want to crop outside my pink area, so I'm going to push the outside. And you see how it cropped it right to the edges that I did earlier. And I'm going to push edges because I want it to clean up those edges as much as it can. Sometimes you still have stops and starts across the top, and that's okay. I notice here that now my reds and greens don't match up, so I'm going to go back into repeat, make sure I'm on the horizontal, and I'm just going to, let me try decreasing that gap. And there, now it's black. Now I know that one is on top of the other. So there is my pattern, the entire quilt top. I'm going to go over here to baseline. And baseline takes out all of those meeting up points and makes it one smooth stitch from left to right. Now at this point, I like to save my design, so I'm going into File and go to Save. I like to save it as a workspace. And I keep my client quilts in here underneath. So let me show you here. This is my D drive where all of the pantographs that I have bought are. And I am going to go down here where it says Customer Quilts. And I have all of my customers listed under here. And so I'm going to save this one. Real quick. Let you look at the quilt while I do that one. Now, when I save a design, I save it under the customer's name, and I will name it. So this one I will name, I'm in the customer's folder at this point. I'm going to name this one Pink, Brown. I don't need to do any more than that. Pink, brown, and I like to put in the date. Nope, this is March, so I'm going to just put 3-2023. Then in parentheses, I put the name of the pantograph, This is the espresso pantograph, and I do the size that I, sorry about that, and then I do the size that I modified it to, so that I can go back at any time and know that, okay, she wanted it tighter on the next quilt, she wanted it looser on the next quilt. I can go back and I know exactly what I did it. And I know the date that I did it, and it just helps me to keep track of everything. So I'm going to save that. It's saving the file, and there it is. So I have saved my workspace. So if for some reason I have to stop in the middle of quilting, I can pull up the workspace the next day and start it again. If some reason I have a glitch, the power goes out, whatever reason, I can restart because I have that workspace saved. So at this point, I have cleaned my machine prior to starting this quilt. I have oiled my machine prior to starting this quilt. I have the thread all threaded. I am using the same color bobbin as I am on the top. So I'm going to line up my quilt over here, that green X where with the circle around it is where it starts at. So I'm going to line that up right there. So I have my needle hovering over where I'm going to start at. I'm going into my Pro Stitcher and quilt, and I want to run. It asked me if my needle is up. I said yes, I'm proceeding. It lines it up exactly, pulls up that bobbin thread, so across the top here I have some stops and starts, just the way the design was when I cropped it to the area. So this first line takes just a tad bit of time, as I could do auto jumps, but my machine doesn't always like that. And move it to the next spot. Okay, so I've done the entire top. You can see on my screen it has it yellow showing that it's already been stitched. And I'm ready to go down all the way to this end, back to the left-hand side, and I'm going to begin stitching out this next row. So I just need to make sure that the entire design will fit on this next spot. And it's going to come down to about there, so I have plenty of room for this design. So I'm going to come back over about to where it's going to start. And begin stitching. Alright, so my bobbin thread ran out here in the middle of a pass. I don't normally like for that to happen, but I should have checked my bobbin thread prior to starting that row just to make sure it wasn't going to do that. But not a problem, we can correct it. So I've pulled the bobbin case out. I have another bobbin that's already wound, and I pop that into the case. And just going to make sure that it's all clean under there. Put in my new bobbin. Alright, and I've backed up a few stitches. It's going to be hard to see because this thread is so close to the quilt top. Backed up a few stitches that had pulled so that all the stitching looks nice, and I'm going to back up to a spot just a few stitches behind that. Then I'm going to come up here to my screen, and I need to enlarge my screen so I can line this up. Need to make sure I'm on pan and not select, because with pan I can move my screen down, and I'm going to line it up right there on that not the easiest to see, but right here where my crosshairs are, that's where my needle is, and that's where I want to start. So I'm going to go to Pro Stitcher, tell it I want a new start and end, and I'm going to come over here. I want it to do auto because I want it to start the new start spot right where my crosshairs are, and push it once and it sets that green and dot right there, and then I press it again to take it off. Otherwise it'll continue to move with my as I move my machine. So let's start this again, and it'll stitch out the rest of this row. Alright, that row has finished stitching out, and I cannot fit another row in this throat space that I have left. So let me show you real quick how I advance the quilt, and then we'll just do, we'll let it finish quilting out, and we'll come back and talk about at the end how I cut it off the long arm. I get you in here close enough that you can see. I'm just going to put my red light right here on this spot right here. It's a point in the quilt, it's very distinct, and I'm going to put my red light right there, and then I'm going to come up here to my screen. I'm going to increase it so that I can see. I'm on pan, so I'm going to come down, and I'm just going to set this little one that's called drag right there. So now as I move my machine, the computer thinks I'm still at the same spot. So at this point I can advance the quilt, and I can set the needle back at that very same spot, and then undrag. What do you call it? Drop is what it's called. I can drop the computer point at that time, and I'm right back in the same spot that I was. So that is set. I don't need to touch that at all. I undo the clamps. I leave the bottom clamp there, undo the top one, undo all the pins except for the bottom one. That way I have just a little bit of tension on there. I do the same thing on the right side. What I do over here on the edge, I undid these clamps, or these little lock features. I undid that, so now that I can rotate the quilt, now I'm going to loosen both of these and tighten the back one up. Now I just need to make sure that my design is going to go up into that other one a tad bit, so I need to make sure that I'm not going to hit these back bars when it goes up into where I need the quilting to go. So the design finishes here, but I'm actually going to be quilting up into part of the design up into here. So I just need to make sure my back bar, or my thread, or my stitching is not too close to the back bar. Okay, now that I have advanced the quilt, now the next thing I need to do is baste down the sides again. I'm going to push the baste button. Do have some fullness here. I'm just going to try to spread it out a little bit. Just work it in so it's not all bunched up into one. The other way that I have, the fullness is quite a bit. What I can do is spray that Best Press on there and use a hot iron, and that'll shrink up that fabric just a little bit and take it in. I don't think this is too bad, so I'll go to the other end and baste that side. Alright, my sides are basted. Now I usually will drop my point prior to basting the sides. I didn't do it this time. I got a little bit ahead of myself. So I just need to line my machine back up with that same point that I marked earlier. I mean, just marked in my mind, you know, that I pressed here. And so then I will push the drop. And so now when I move it, my crosshairs are exactly where I am on the quilt. So I just need to check my points to make sure that as I moved, everything is still lined up. So I'll come to a certain point on the quilt and I will pan up here, make this a little larger, just to see that I'm at the same spot on the quilt as I am, and you can see it's very, very close. I'm very close to that same spot. Not enough that if it's off just a tad, you're not going to notice that with this pantograph. So I'll check a spot down here to make sure I'm lined up down here. This one's a little farther off, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my computer right there at the tip of that point, and then I'm going to use just a tad bit, a little scrap of batting, and I'm going to press in here behind the bar, and that'll just adjusting where I want that to line up. Okay, just pulling on the fabric a little bit, lined it up where I need it. I didn't even need that piece of batting. Alright, so let me reduce my screen just a tad bit so I can see where I'm at. And now I'm ready. My computer is going to start at the next spot, which is right there, because I finished up here, finished that. It's still continuing on that same stitch. It's ready to go to the next spot, which is going to be right here. I have plenty of room for this one. The bottom of it is going to be in that range there, so I have plenty of room. And so I'm going to set that right there, and I need to set the camera down because I need to hold my thread while it drops the while it secures that stitch. Seeing that I am only getting one pass from left to right before I'm having to advance the quilt, and that's because the size of the design that I have right now. So the design is what I would guess 8-10 inches tall, stitching out all the way across. Not every design is that way. Some pantographs are a lot smaller. If I had made this particular pantograph a lot smaller, I would be able to get several more rows in here, but just the size that this one is, by the time it stitches out the first row, I don't have quite enough room down here at the bottom bar to get a second row in. So that's why it's only doing one pass, but that one pass is taking a good amount of time to go. So I'm able to work on some other quilting stuff, or run and work on dinner or something like that while this is running. Now, I am out of bobbin thread. I have gone through 3 bobbins so far, and I am probably a third of the way through the quilt. So I am going to need to wind some more bobbins, so let me take you over to the bobbin winder. So here is my handy quilter bobbin winder. I keep it over on a shelf underneath my window at the end of my long arm, and I only have 1 cone of this omni thread, so I have clipped the thread and moved the cone over to here, and I am going to wind 3 bobbins. So these are the bobbins that I'm winding on. This, when I'm winding this thread onto here, it doesn't get as much onto one of these bobbins as the pre-wound bobbins. This pre-wound bobbin, the thread is a much thinner weight of thread than this omni thread is here, so not as much will fit on here. So this is one reason why I'm going through bobbins so much quicker than I would if I was using a pre-wound bobbin. So that's one of the advantages of using a pre-wound. I'm only going to do 3 bobbins. I don't want to fill too many bobbins and then have a bunch of bobbins with this color on it, on a color that I don't use very often. So I have the thread coming up off of the spool, through the top eye, down through this eye down here, wrapped through the tension discs, brought over here to the bobbin. I wound it around just a couple times, and then this dial here controls the speed. I have mine set on about a 4.5, almost a 5, and I'll push start. All right, so I have my bobbins wound, and putting it back in the case, and putting it back into the machine. Now, I haven't been showing you, but I am cleaning out the bottom where the bobbin is held each time that it gets to the end. Or in between bobbins. I clean that out regularly because of the lint that builds up. I haven't been showing you that just because you don't need to see my head going underneath the long arm. But that is, you do need to clean your lint out of that. And so here is the thread cone that I took off. And when I took it off, I clipped the thread way up here so that I don't have to thread the machine again. So now I just need to tie those ends back together. And pull that back through. Just anytime I pull thread through, I need to make sure that the thread stays between those tension discs, or I need to put it back in there if it came out. So now I just need to thread the needle again because I did not pull the thread through the needle. I didn't want to bend my needle or the knot that I created get stuck in the eye of the needle. I'm going to turn my lights back on just for a second so I can see that eye. Alright, and like I said, I normally run my machine with those lights on, but just because it causes a glare on the camera, I'm not keeping that on while I'm filming. So I did run out of bobbin in the middle of a pass, so I'm going to go back here to where that stopped. Just going to undo a couple threads here because usually at the end of a bobbin, those last few threads, the last few stitches get kind of really elongated and pulled out of whack, and so I want to go back to where the stitching is perfect. So I just unstitch part of that, and then I back up even from there a couple more stitches. So I'm going to bring this in close so I can see where it finished, and line it back up. So I'm pushing the new start and end, telling it auto. Push it once, turns auto on, it moves my starting position to that spot, push it again, and it leaves it at that spot. I'm going to back it up just a little bit. You want to make sure you're in the exact right spot you want to be. And I'm ready to start quilting again.